Count them with me now. 1, 2, 3. That's how many overtimes it took for the Laval Rocket to sweep the series and advance to the conference finals. Well, hello, friends. Welcome to this week's episode of Habs Hockey Report right here on the All Habs YouTube channel, part of Rocket Sports Media. We're so glad that you're here today. Boy, do we have an exciting show for you today because there are some really exciting things happening in the Canadiens organization right now. We're going to get to that in a minute. First, welcome. If you're a new subscriber or a new viewer, we're glad to have you here. If you are a new viewer and you haven't subscribed yet, please remember to hit that subscribe button, hit the notification bell. We'll be here every Thursday with a new episode of Habs Hockey Report. My name is Amy Johnson. I'm your host of the show every week, also the lead correspondent at ahlreport.com and part of Rocket Sports Media, of course. And we're just so glad that you're here. If you are new to the show and you haven't told us before yet where you're watching from, well, then I'm making a call for the All Habs roll call. Drop a comment down below. Let us know where you're watching from if you haven't yet reached out to tell us that. We'd love to know where everyone is watching from around the world. And of course, as I said, we've got a great show for you today. We've got a little bit of Habs news for you. Believe me, each and every week there's always something going on with the Montreal Canadiens. So I'm going to talk a little bit about some rumors that are spreading a little bit for the Montreal Canadiens, as well as catch up on some of the players who are actually still playing hockey, just not in the Stanley Cup playoffs. And then, of course, we're going to focus on the Laval Rocket. Yes, as I mentioned there in the teaser, the Laval Rocket's heading to the AHL Calder Cup Conference final for the Eastern Conference. We're going to break all of that down for you. I've got some audio and video from head coach J.F. Houle talking about it, immediate reaction right after the game and right after the series sweep. So you don't want to miss that. And we've got your answers from last week's feedback forum question. We're going to talk about those a bit later on in the show. Speaking of the feedback forum, let's get you thinking about this week's question. And this week's question is kind of related to, it's one of those things that I was contemplating last night during this very lengthy extended game for the Laval Rocket. And it made me think of something I'd like to see changed in the NHL. So I thought perhaps I'd ask you, what's one thing? Now, I know some of you will probably have more than one thing that you would like to change as far as a rule in the NHL. But if you had to pick just one, if you were only allowed to pick one rule that you could change in the NHL, what would it be? What would it be? I'm going to tell you what mine is later on in this show. Drop your comment down below, answer the question, and we'll be sure to read your answers next week on the show. In the meantime, let's get started. We always start with the Habs Happenings, and yes, while it's the off season and yes, it's the summertime, there are still things to talk about with the Montreal Canadiens. The first is that there's been more than one pundit and insider out there this past week making some rumblings about Martin St. Louis. First, Renaud Lavoie put something out, and then more recently, Darren Dreger in the last 24 hours or so, making comments out there on social media saying, the Canadiens are still pretty tight-lipped about things, but not to be surprised if we don't see a contract for new head coach Martin St. Louis coming as an announcement from the Canadiens sometime in the imminent future. So I think it's kind of official head coach contract watch in the city of Montreal. It's we've speculated that all of the fun and excitement that Marty St. Louis and an energy injection that he brought after Dominique Ducharme's firing, that he would likely be offered a contract. I had said on a previous episode of this show that I was hoping that the Canadiens would do a little bit of due diligence in the offseason just to interview some other candidates as well as they become available. And we've seen that there's some pretty tremendous candidates available. I mean, you've got Barry Trotz available. You've got Pete DeBoer available. John Tortorella interviewed with the Philadelphia Flyers this week. So there are some really good candidates out there. As I said, I was hoping they would do a little bit of due diligence. And then if they decided to go with St. Louis, then that would be okay. We still have to wait and see how all that's going to shape out, but it's looking like St. Louis is going to be given the head coaching position permanently. The question will be, do they give him just a 1 year like Vancouver did with Bruce Boudreau, just to give him one full season and see what he can do? Or are they automatically going to go to the 3-year extension? And that's what they did with Dom Ducharme, which ended up really backfiring for them last year. Perhaps if they had given Ducharme just a 1-year contract, that would have been a little easier to swallow when he didn't even last his full first year of his contract. So we'll have to wait to see if it's actually coming. But it seems like as hype kind of starts to come out more and more, particularly from some of the top insiders around the league, that it's getting close, that we're going to hear an announcement about St. Louis soon. If you are hungry for hockey and you're not watching the Calder Cup playoffs, perhaps you're watching the Stanley Cup playoffs, or perhaps you're watching the IIHF World Championships happening over in Helsinki. Groups are now advancing to the quarterfinals, and with that, 4 Montreal Canadiens organization players are advancing to the quarterfinals. Yoel Armia scoring a big goal at the one of the end of Finland's last game in the preliminary round. But Yoel Armia is advancing for Team Finland. For Team USA, we've got Sean Farrell, who also potted an empty netter at the end of their preliminary round wrap-up game, as well as Jordan Harris, who hasn't suited up yet. This is kind of a head-scratcher for me. It's curious to me that Jordan Harris hasn't yet made the lineup. Would like to see him dress at least once just to get a little bit of international play experience over there, but he is on the team and advancing to the quarterfinals in case he needs to slot in. And then, of course, for Team Canada, Josh Anderson also moving on to the quarterfinals. So pretty exciting to watch those guys as they represent their respective countries over in Helsinki. And it's a great way to just keep cheering on those Habs, even though the Montreal Canadiens aren't playing in the Stanley Cup playoffs right now. I should also mention, as the off season is the time that we start thinking about next season. And this past week on the Canadiens Connection podcast here at Rocket Sports Media, Rick Stevens, Michael Spinella, Chris G all got together for a great episode where they took a deep dive on ways that Ken Hughes, Jeff Gordon could alter and change the defense for the Habs. There's lots of things that the Habs need to fix next year, but the defense is one of them, and that's the topic they decided to tackle. If you happen to miss that episode or are interested to hear their thoughts and ideas on what you could see happen this summer on the back end for the Canadiens, just click this link right above, check out the podcast. You won't regret it. All right, it's Rocket Booster time. This is an exciting part of the show this week because I tell you what, the Laval Rocket charging full steam ahead. We talked about last week, Al, they were getting set and starting the North Division Final Series against the Rochester Americans, another best-of-5 series, and Laval turns around, wins both games at home. Rochester looking a bit like a shadow of themselves in these games, really struggling to clear the puck out of their zone, really struggling to penetrate the offensive zone, really struggling to maintain puck possession. And the Rocket were just on them like glue, not giving them any space, not a lot of open lanes, and keeping things really tight, a lot of checking, forechecking hard, and sure enough, Laval took advantage of 2 games, game 1 and 2 on home ice at Place Bell in front of practically one night sold out, the next night pretty close to sold out, so around 10,000 fans each night, and they managed to get 2 wins. That meant last night they headed into Rochester up 2-0 in the series for Game 3, which automatically made it an elimination game for the Rochester Americans, yet their first game on home ice. To their credit, the Amerks fans responded in kind. It was a sellout crowd there as well, with over 10,000 fans packed in Blue Cross Arena. They were loud. They were rambunctious. It was a great atmosphere there for this game. And boy, I used the word bananas and bonkers last night while covering this game, because it was all ends of the spectrum. Tension, anxiety, thrills, chills. I mean, it was a great game of hockey. Rochester went up 2-0 early in this one, and it took until the second half of the second period before Laval finally something fell into place and clicked. And in the course of about 4.5 minutes, Laval scored 4 unanswered goals. Insane. So they go up 4-2. They now have a 2-goal lead heading into the third period. And there's a swing to the other end of the ice again. Rochester manages to tie it up, then manages to retake the lead 5-4 for Rochester. And then, thankfully, the officiating in this one was bizarre. I'm using all the B's: bonkers, bananas, bizarre. The officiating was bizarre and really less than consistent. And there were, Laval should be thanking their lucky stars, because there were a lot of blatant penalties that the refs could have assessed to Laval that they let slide. I can understand why Seth Appert, head coach of the Rochester Americans, was livid at one point. The fans were flipping out about it, and I could understandably so. But to their credit, Laval ended up getting a power play in the final 2 minutes of regulation, down a goal, 5-4. Trying to sweep the series. Jesse Ylönen finds a way to get a puck through on Aaron Dell and ties the game to force overtime. And forcing overtime, I mean, you would think that would be, a quick, but remember, this isn't 3-on-3 5-minute overtime anymore. This is full period overtime. And it took not one overtime period, not 2 overtime periods, but just about 2 minutes into the third overtime period, Jean-Sébastien D and Xavier Ouellet find each other, get the goal. Jean-Sébastien D, this is his former team. He came to Laval from the Rochester Americans, gets the goal, gets the game winner, gets the series winner, gets the sweep, and it means Laval is advancing to the Eastern Conference Final. They're just one of 4 teams that will be remaining in Calder Cup playoff action for the AHL. It was an exciting game. If you missed any of it, check out our recap at ahlreport.com. In fact, I wanted to share with you a piece of fan mail that we got from one of our very loyal readers of the websites, a podcast listener, a viewer here on the show, who sent in a comment on one of our recent game recaps for the Laval Rocket. And he says, "Salut bien, cher amis, Rocket CH9." He says, 2 big wins to go. This was right after Laval had won the back-to-back games at home last week. 1 to go. Development League, development team, how to best develop players? Easy. Win, baby, win. He says, "Merci pour les infos." Thank you for the information, Amy. Thanks for the post game. These kids are our future. They should not be neglected or underestimated. The grass is not always more green on the other side. From Le Petit Bill. Thank you so much. We always appreciate hearing from you. And we always enjoy hearing how excited you are about the prospects for any of you, and that you really appreciate the work that our AHL report team does in bringing you full coverage of the prospects down in the AHL. So thanks so much for your comment. Right now, we're going to just bring you some immediate reaction from head coach J.F. Houle. First off, one of the things I asked him, I said, the pace was really high in this game. And then you go into triple overtime. I asked him, what was the key in keeping the energy and managing the energy on your bench so that guys didn't tire out too quickly? And this is what he said.
Just short shifts for us. I thought we rolled 4 lines. We didn't cut our bench at all. I thought all 4 lines were going. So I didn't feel the necessity of cutting the lines. And that's an advantage that you have when you feel confident about your lineup. And we just kept rolling, and I thought we had some good energy. Even in overtime, I thought we had the better chances, and it was coming. We were knocking at the door. We had some really good grade A chances in all three overtimes, and it was just a matter of time for us before we find that goal.
Despite that, let me tell you, they looked tired. To their credit, Rochester looked more tired. By the middle of the second overtime, it looked like they were skating through mud. Really heavy legs at both ends of the ice. But JF Houle's team was slightly more fresh at times than Rochester was, and that may be what helped propel them to the win. I did mention that it was Jesse Ullinen who scored the tying goal. Now, think about that. They were less than 2 minutes away from Rochester winning the game and extending their season, and then having to come back into Rochester on Friday night to play a Game 4 and try to tie up the series again, which would be another mountain to climb. And Jesse Ullinen ties the game on the power play. Here's what JF Houle told me after the game about Ullinen's play in this game.
The final minute of the third, with pulling our goalie and finding that one goal was it was obviously key of the game, because we didn't get that many shots in the third, and Elo was right in front of the net in the right spot, and I thought that he had a strong game. Same thing with JSD.
The Montreal Canadiens may have had the worst season in history, or at least in a long time, as far as we can remember. But their counterparts in the AHL are doing some pretty special things, and they are advancing to the conference final. Now, they have to wait to find out who their opponent is going to be. They swept this series 3-0. They have to wait for the Atlantic Division final to finish in order to find out who they're going to face. That final is currently being played versus Springfield Thunderbirds versus the Charlotte Checkers. Springfield, of course, is the St. Louis Blues affiliate, and the Charlotte Checkers is a dual affiliation with the Florida Panthers and the Seattle Kraken this year, until the Kraken have their own AHL affiliate, the Coachella Valley Firebirds, next year. And so Springfield is currently winning that series 2-0, but Game 3 doesn't happen until Saturday night. Games 3, because of the distance between Charlotte and Springfield, the first two games were played in Springfield, even though Charlotte has home ice advantage. So now games 3, 4, and 5, if necessary, are all played in Charlotte. So Charlotte is a very strong team. Actually, Springfield and Charlotte are two of the best teams in the Eastern Conference this year. So it is fully possible that Charlotte could come up with some magic now on home ice for 3 consecutive games and push this to a Game 5. And it is anyone's guess as to who's going to come out as the winner. The interesting thing is the Habs will face former teammates no matter who it is. If it's Springfield, well, then they're facing Will Bitton. They're facing Matthew Pekka. And if he's back from the NHL, if the Blues don't make it past the Avalanche, then they'll be facing Charlie Lindgren in net. Charlie Lindgren and Joel Hofer, probably one of the toughest tandems in the AHL right now, at least particularly on the East Coast. If they face the Charlotte Checkers, however, they will be facing guys like Gustav Olofsson and Cale Fleury. Also some familiar names like Connor Bunnavan, German Rubtsov, former Phantoms opponents who now play with Charlotte, as well as a host of really solid AHL players and top prospects for the Florida Panthers, the Seattle Kraken, and the St. Louis Blues. So no matter who their opponent is, it's going to be a thrilling series. Just have to wait and see who it's going to be. The Rocket have off now. They're not going to practice until Monday, so probably sometime early to midweek next week is when the conference final will begin. You can guarantee that our team at ahlreport.com is going to be there every step of the way. Interviews at the games, bringing you all the recaps. So be sure you're following at the AHL Report on Twitter. And also be sure to check out the Press Zone podcast. That comes out every Tuesday, hosted by myself and Rick Stevens, where we'll also get you caught up on all the latest Laval Rocket action with Habs prospects. Well, with all of that excitement, it's also another exciting time of the show, which is the Habs Fan Hub. This is the part of the show where we get to talk with you. We get to hear from you. We read your comments. We read your mail. We read your responses. And we like to show off what great Habs fans you are. Remember, if you're going on vacation and you're taking some Hab gear with you, make sure you take a picture and post it on social media. When you do that, use the hashtag #ShowYourHabs, and we will feature your photo right here on the show. Let's see how far and wide that CH is going to go this summer as everyone enjoys their vacation, even if that vacation is only as far as your backyard for a barbecue. We want to see what great Habs fans you are. Also, remember, the All Habs mailbag is always open. Drop us a comment down below if you've got a question about the Canadiens, about the Laval Rocket, about Habs prospects, hockey in general, you name it. If you've got a question, drop it down below in the comment section. We'll put it in the All Habs mailbag and we will answer it right here on the show in a future episode. Of course, this week, we of course wanted to remind you that the feedback forum question, we want to hear from you on this so that we can talk about it next week. If you could change one rule, if you were only allowed one, maybe you have 3, 4, 5, 6 rules that you'd like to change, but if you could only change one, what would be your most important NHL rule that you would like to see changed? For me, ditch the shootout. And I don't mean that, and as I said at the top of the show, I thought about it last night as I was enduring triple overtime. Funny anecdote. I was getting very bad flashbacks to a few years back when I was covering the Lehigh Valley Phantoms as well as the Laval Rocket. And I believe it was 2017 or 18. In the division final round of the playoffs, the Phantoms were in Charlotte facing the Checkers, and they broke an AHL record going to 5 overtimes. I was covering that game. That game ended at something like 1:45 in the morning. The guys could barely skate. I could barely keep my eyes open. I mean, chugging the coffee, trying to eat something to stay awake. It was, I wear it like a badge of honor now. I have a puck from it as well. I mean, it's commemorating. It was a record-breaking night. It now holds the AHL record for the longest overtime game in the AHL. So I was getting some kind of vicious flashbacks about that last night. But as I was going through all of these overtimes and thinking about it, I was like, but this is just it. Like, this is at least exciting, not the shootout. I really just hate the shootout, and I'd love to see them do away with it. Now, I'm not saying go to full 20-minute 5-on-5 periods. I like the 3-on-3. I just think that they could do 3-on-3, 5-minute 3-on-3 periods, and maybe do a max of 3 of those or something like that. Somebody's going to score a 3-on-3 in 5 minutes if you do that repeatedly. But I think that's a much more exciting way to decide a game than a skills competition. Don't love it. So that's my choice. What's your choice? If you could change one rule in the NHL for next year, what would it be? Let me know in the comments below. Last week's feedback forum question, of course, we were talking about the fact that Kent Hughes announced the hiring of someone to head up their hockey analytics department. And so the question was, how much stock do you put in analytics? Kind of broken into a 2-part question. And those are, do you think that analytics is important to a hockey team? Like, do you really see value in a hockey team using analytics? And on the flip side of that, how important are analytics for you as a fan for your enjoyment of the game? We had a couple of great answers. Michael Spinella, of course, says analytics are very important, just as important as the eye test. And I said that was a great answer, but then I challenged Mr. Spinella and I said, okay, that's a fair response. And I feel like one of those teachers saying, show me your work. I responded and I said, can you tell me why? Like, what parts of analytics do you feel are so important? And to his credit, he obliged and gave us this response. He says, the best example I can think of, and I hope I explain this well, is that Corsi is a good indication of whether or not a team's style of play is sustainable. Teams that have a poor Corsi and are winning a lot of games will likely not be able to continue winning that many games in the long run. It happens a lot where teams have a poor Corsi and have a winning record one season, but the next season end up at the bottom of the league. So I appreciate that, Michael, explaining an area of analytics that you think is an important measuring tool of the performance on the ice, and obviously something that you enjoy keeping an eye on as a fan as well. So thank you for your comment. Really appreciate that. Paul also says analytics, great for the planners, coach, etc. to consider, but players don't need to fill their heads with more. Cheers. Thank you, Paul, for your comments as well. I think that's an interesting response as well. He's saying, I think that analytics are great for all of the people who are doing the planning and the managing of the team, but let the players just play hockey. Let them do what they're trained to do. Let them do what comes second nature to them. Don't fill their head with a bunch of stats and analytics, which is certainly, analytics can be a very hot topic and controversial depending on who you talk to. So some great answers. Thanks so much for your submissions. I look forward to hearing from all of you on this week's feedback forum question. As always, if you missed last week's show, you can find that one right here. And I can't wait to see you back here again next Thursday for another exciting episode of Habs Hockey Report.